Reichsbank securities were issued only by a military plant for financing of light industry. Germans actively attracted foreign loans. In May 1933, Schacht visited the USA where he met with President Franklin Roosevelt and Wall Street bankers. America singled out Germany loans worth $1 billion to German industry. Private investors were also willing to invest. The Rockefellers, Morgan and Milan, DuPont and Rockefeller Oil Corporation. Standard Oil in the 30s was the largest supplier. Petroleum products for Hitlerite Germany. The Nazi Party financed American car manufacturer Henry Ford for participation in the development of the German economy. Ford was awarded the Order Merit of the German Eagle, highest award. Third Reich. For foreigners, very active contacts in Germany were the United States, and these were economic ties associated with investing. Money is allowed, firstly, to raise new automotive industry branch which was of military importance. Western companies invested days in Germany. Do you think that this business is good, profitable there quickly? All this is developing. The port is very contributed to the development of the motor construction industry in Germany. The French helped create aircraft construction in Germany is also not secret. (1939) In terms of industrial production, Germany entered the first place in Europe and second in the world after the USA for the 5 pre-war years. Gross domestic, the country's product has grown by more than 2 times, and the growth of military production increased 10 times. If in 1931 in only 13 aircraft were produced in the country, then in 1939 8,295 construction began, military and civilian infrastructure all over Germany. 4-lane autobahn analogs, which at that time in Europe were not yet. Hundreds of airfields were reconstructed and ports. Grandiose construction finished with unemployment which decreased 15 times. The country was introduced universal labor conscription, and the entire working population instead of trade unions was united in German labor front. Improvement living standards of German workers was at the heart of popular support. Gepure in Germany were introduced. Compulsory payments to families for birth children. Hitler said that every German employee must have a car at a price 990 marks. It was 3 months' salaries of qualified German worker. All the social benefits of Hitler's regime applied only to German population of Germany. 1935 in Nuremberg, Hitler signed a law according to which all Jews, Slavs and other peoples of Europe were named racially inferior. Nazis banned them to hold any government posts, marry Germans and carry on own business. Music. Yes, the population actively supported Hitler, especially at first, and Hitler's propaganda is in a certain sense played on this populism associated with "so that we will raise Germany from its knees and significantly improve the life of the Germans who, after Versailles, had enough hardened attitude towards the regime thanks to running military production and liquidation. Unemployment is definitely against the Germans, even which are aesthetically pleasing initially attributed their National Socialism to her, became more loyal. By the beginning of 1939, Germany's national debt reached record amount 47 billion Reichsmarks. Colossal military and civilian expenses could only be replenished by issuing new money, which is inevitable would lead the country to economic disaster. The 7th of January, 1939, Hjalmar Schacht sent a letter to Hitler in which indicated that the course by the government will lead to the collapse of the German financial system and hyperinflation. After 2 weeks, Mainz resigned from his post. The president of a German bank, and the paradox lies in the fact that it is to 39th year. The regime is actually turned into a soap bubble because all miracle economic, which would say created thanks to the Minister of Finance, I mean it should have been at 38th and 9th year to burst, because at those military orders that existed they didn't pay with money for them. The state paid short-term financial obligations, the maturity of which was about to come. So here the paradox behind this is that people started believe the regime that could burst like a soap bubble because he was not financially secured in any way. So that avoid the financial crisis, Hitler urgently needed to replenish foreign exchange reserve of the country. Arranged in Germany, massive robberies and deportations of the Jewish population did not bring the required income to replenish the treasury. The Nazis began sell art from 1,500 museums, and private galleries were seized and sold about 16,000 paintings and sculptures, but this did not help. The urgent need for gold reserves was one of the reasons the Anschluss of Austria and the Sudeten occupation the region of Czechoslovakia in 1938. The Germans did not just confiscated all the gold from the banks captured countries, but also achieved the transfer Czechoslovak assets worth £6 million from English accounts back in March 1939. Hitler completely included Czech Republic, Arabia and Cuba. The heterosexual acted very pragmatically. Why did the number begin? Then honestly confessed that all these Czech questions they were to whom as well. Then it turns out, and the right of the minks themselves, Sudeten, it will cost me need was the industrial base of the Czechoslovakians, and minerals and industry. 1 military property and equipment. The equipment was removed from the vague cover. 20 billion kroons is a huge amount which very seriously strengthened the economic potential of Germany. Captured Czechoslovakia. Hitler got the Germans got 1.5 rich trophies, 1 million rifles, 4,000 guns and mortars, over 6,000 tanks and self-propelled guns. The 22nd of June, 1941, armored vehicles produced by the Czech concern Skoda made up a quarter of the Park German tank divisions of the first echelon, and what is Slovakia being occupied merged quite so organically into economy of the Third Reich to the very end of the war. Produced for the Germans itself different military equipment ranging from small arms ending with tanks, aircraft components. Capture of Czech gold and industry delayed start war but did not solve the problem with dead Hitler regime. Summer 1939, national debt Germany increased by 1/3 and reached 60 billion Reichsmarks. Hitler began planning a new military campaign, this time against Poland. By this time the main ally Hitler became fascist Italy in Europe, led by a charismatic dictator Benito Mussolini. In May 1939, just 3 months before Germany's attack on Poland, Hitler and Mussolini concluded the so-called Steel Pact, mutual assistance and alliance agreement, case of war with any third country. The 1st of September 1939, Hitler's troops invaded Poland. Soon on its territory were created concentration camps for extermination people during the war years. Through German, over 18 million people attended the camps. Their personal belongings have become an important source income for the Nazis. These values divided into several categories: gold bars, gold and silver coins, forks, our jewelry, gold and diamond rings, gold dental wrist and pocket watch, crowns, gold from death camps credited to an account in Swiss National Bank for the most common. According to the estimates of the inhabitants of the occupied countries, the Germans confiscated tens of tons of gold worth about $150 million. This number does not include those items and jewelry that massive ones were implemented through state pawnshops in Germany. The first stages of the war, 39-40, by robbery, productive labor confiscation, shamelessly pumping, so to speak, Germany here material and technical resources of the affiliated countries before was secured a fairly higher level of effort, but for how it was achieved at the expense of robbery, destruction, foreign states due to the huge number forced harvested Germany workers who worked for Sasha. Very few people train in humiliating conditions, remembers, but even from the prosperous Czechoslovakia 600,000 was acquitted. Show for work Germany, how much of Soviet Union and how much from France. Everything was too The beginning of the Second World War allowed Germany to avoid financial crisis, but there are new problems of Achilles. The fifth of the Third Reich was the absence of strategic raw materials, without which the military industry could not work, and the Wehrmacht fight for the purchase imported raw materials in Berlin. There was no money count on American and British loans. Hitler could no longer, with the beginning of the war and the naval blockade of Germany, overseas shipments by the British Navy reduced to a minimum. There was a particularly acute shortage of iron ore, bauxite, hair dam rubber and oil, as well as alloying minerals such as molybdenum, nickel, chromium or tungsten, which were added to metal alloys and significantly improved them strength and quality. Music. By the way, it hit great German tank industry because the weapon could be made of low carbon steel, but when Reich began to lose supply of alloying materials, the quality of German armor plummeted, and you can even say that, for example, armor of tanks of production or 30s and Tyradin on Panzer, then it was the highest quality. Royal Defense Tigers were on the contrary qualitatively. I do not see plinth. The problem of lack of alloying additives. Hitler was helped to solve contraband deliveries from Spain and Portugal and Turkey. These countries have announced their neutrality in the war but continued trade with Germany as expected. The German position was taken by Spain and Portugal, and across Spain-Portugal from were the delivery gate with such strategic material like tungsten. How did the Germans cope with the Soviet heavy tanks? 1941. Tens of thousands, do not exaggerate, exactly tens of thousands of sub-caliber shells, solid core shells, who even ran through the armor of someone, and 400 meters, which was made of carbide tungsten for Germany, which did not have large reserves of tungsten. It looks surprisingly, where did he come from the first years of the war? Hitler did not have resources to conduct protracted military campaigns in Berlin, relied on blitzkrieg tactics. Lightning war just like that. In the spring 1940 was occupied by Denmark, then following her Norway. In May of the same year Hitler captured Belgium and Holland and France. The Germans took out 350,000 from Belgium cars in France, confiscated 5,000 steam locomotives and captured a large part of industrial capacity of this country by the summer of 1941. Each the fourth tank in the German army was Czech or French, and one of the most powerful tanks of the Wehrmacht with the attack on the Usa was French B-2 half super. Heavy shelling or later Leningrad and Sevastopol were produced in France and the Czech Republic. French firms were themselves ready to take to order the Germans, since occupied France was starving and big food problems, naturally in search of a way out of this situations.